So my name is Simon Tannock and I'm the co-founder of AlgaEnviro and we manufacture Diatomix. So obviously where we've been today, we're all familiar with the fact that there are all sorts of nutrient issues within the environment. One of the areas we particularly get involved in is where there are blue-green algae events. Because of the way our system manages nutrients, we can reduce blue-green algae. But it's a commonly accepted rule that if you're going to trying to grow something, then elemental ratios are really important. And thank you to everyone else who's been talking about the carbon-nitrogen ratio, and also there's the nitrogen-phosphate ratios and things like that. And one of the other parts of that whole ratio that is generally forgotten about is the micronutrient ratio. Just like we need coffee, which I would call a micronutrient, or a Red Bull. Plants, need things like iron, like manganese, like copper and boron. So it's important to ensure that for a healthy ecosystem that there is micronutrients available there. The next part for me is that it's important to quickly capture those nutrients in the water, particularly for the Great Barrier Reef scenario, where if you've got nutrients coming out of a cane farm, it'd be really good if you could capture them before they hit the reef. Now, I do want to just point out one little point, probably doesn't show too well here, but this value here is 0.3 milligrams per cubic metre of nitrogen in the water. And for an example I'll be giving later, I just wanted to highlight that fact. With Diatomix, what we aim to do is actually to correct the micronutrient to gross nutrient or macronutrient, being nitrogen and phosphorus ratio, to try and drive nature to restore health to the water. We do that by adding our mix of Diatomix into the water based on the amount of nitrogen and phosphorus that's in the water. What we've done is, by boosting diatom growth, which is a type of microalgae, we can then start pushing nitrogen and phosphorus into the food chain, because diatoms are at the bottom of the food chain. In doing that, we can basically step it through all the way. So the short version would be, if you add our product, you'll grow birds and fish. So diatoms are pretty much everywhere. They're in freshwater, they're in marine systems, they're in the soil at the top layers where light gets there as well. And they are, as I said, at the bottom of the food chain. With Diatomix, it's a silica gel in a nanoscale. So it's 5 to 20 nanometer little gels of silica. And we've embedded micronutrients that any plant would want, but we've embedded them into the silica. Now, diatoms are the only type of algae that would want silica. So when it's floating around, blue-green algae and green algae, even water hyacinth and salvinia, look at it, go, silica, I don't care. Diatoms go, oh, silica, brilliant. They nuzzle up beside it, they start using it, and then suddenly they realise there's iron, there's manganese, there's boron, there's copper, all those micronutrients that they'd really like. Now that they've been given that, they can now start using more nitrogen and phosphorus. So they grab more of that and it's taken away from the inorganic supply, which means that other things can't use it. To date, we've done wastewater trials because they often have a blue-green algae issue. On the left-hand side, this is with Queensland Urban Utilities. This is a lagoon system that was very heavily populated with blue-green algae. 8 weeks later, we had reduced the average cell count from around 1.6 million cells per mil down to about, I think it was about 110,000 cells. And as you can see between those two, there's a huge difference in the water clarity and the amount of algae in the water. A lot of diatoms are actually benthic diatoms, so they're all spread around the bottom, which is why we're still effective, but we don't actually have algae floating around in the system. At another site we had, the site operator rang up and said, it looks like a farm dam after 8 weeks. There are so many insects in here, and for the first time in 5 years, the birds are back and they're feeding in this area because it was toxic due to blue-green algae and the pH was too high. Through our system, we've brought it down, and now he says it's like a farm dam. This is another wastewater example. Now, probably, obviously, very different to a reef system because there is constantly high levels of nutrient coming in. But for me, the take-home message is When we turned on, so this is the Lagoon 2 and the Lagoon 3 dosing, when we turned that on, we brought down the blue-green algal counts and the total cell counts, but we also stabilised them from these various peaks. Unfortunately, this trial didn't get to run for as long as it could, but this is through summer, which is the very highest peak time for blue-green algae. So to flatline this over that time is really, really positive. And we've done this on a number of, I have other graphs that basically give the same story. Furthermore, before we started it, the total nitrogen, total phosphorus in Lagoon 2 and Lagoon 3, and then after we started dosing it, we've brought them down, but as I said, there is such a constant flow inwards, you're not going to see them go down. But in a natural environment, we would expect to see it continually come down because it will move into the animal food chain, and then those levels will come down. It can basically be added when there's water and there's sunshine, so it doesn't matter whether it's the dry season or the wet season. It will, of course, slow down a little bit in some scenarios over winter, but not such an issue as you go north. We just need to understand what the flow rates or volumes of water are and what the nitrogen and phosphorus concentrations are to work out how much to dose. And that can be done through an automated dosing system, or if it's a farm dam, it can be just spread out by the farmer himself. We are currently working to develop a dosing drone that will be GPS guided. So for very large areas, it will be like a little solar power boat, and it will just go around and it will dose to help remove the operator costs out of a scenario. We also have had site results where within 24 hours we've gone from that horrible blue-green algae green to the brown. So diatoms are genetically positioned to be very fast responding to a change of nutrients. So when we add our nutrients, they immediately start growing. It's a very quick response. Our caveats would be that if there's not enough silica in the water relative to the nitrogen concentration, you won't get as much silica growth. Even though we add silica, it's not the source of silica that the diatoms need. We use it as the nanotechnology to sneak the micronutrients towards the diatoms. So we're not a supplement of silica. If your site has a history of blue-green algae, then it's best to start dosing it before that would normally occur rather than during the middle of it, because blue-green algae are persistent, and we don't really work under a pH of 6, but under most scenarios that isn't a problem for anyone. I just wanted to run through one example as a costing. So that 0.3 milligrams per cubic metre that I mentioned earlier, I've run it up to 0.5 milligrams. So if you had a 1 hectare site with 4 metres depth, you've got about 40 megalitres. And if you imagine a 1 megalitre per day exchange rate across there, then the monthly cost of Diatomix for that is $1 per hectare per month. And that will capture about 600 grams or 0.6 kilograms of the inorganic nitrogen and move it on that journey towards being fish, birds, eels, turtles, all those things that eat diatoms and zooplankton and things like that. So on a per kilogram of total nitrogen or inorganic nitrogen cost, it's around $2 for treatment. That's me and our company and our website, and I also quickly want to touch on the Anzac aerator because Andrew Nicol has a wonderful system and he also wanted to speak, but we've kind of just gelled those two together. This system is very efficient for mixing and aeration within stored water lagoons and also in stratified systems. It would also be a really nice place to sit a Diatomix dosing station if you felt so inclined. There are a lot of synergies with the Anzac system as well. So Andrew has a sign out the back if you want to capture him later. Thank you.